I am unashamed. What about you?
Welcome back to Unashamed. Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah.
2025 is here. We're still recording. Our recordings are a little, you never know what's going to come out, but we're during the holiday season, New Year's. We got Reed in the house. And Reed, this is the first time on Unashamed?
It is.
This is Jase's oldest, Reed, one of my favorite nephews, for a lot of different reasons. He has picked up the mantle on Dad's hamburgers, but way like with the cuts of meat now, Reed. You've taken that to another level, so...
Well,
anybody that cooks for me, I like him.
Reed has he has surpassed my cooking skills.
He's good,
which wasn't something I really bragged about. There's a few things I do well, but that's it. Yeah. But he went on way.
Kind of like me. I'm a specialty.
Reed, let me ask you a question about the hamburgers.
Oh boy!
We had a debate on the
I
podcast.
knew
This wasn't a debate. It was a really good discussion until the phrase "processed cheese."
I will say, people have come out and supported Zach. I've been surprised that I've had some supporters.
Have you looked around?
What kind of cheese do you use on your cheeseburger?
American cheese. Yep. Processed
what kind?
American cheese.
So Reed does it too.
Oh, interesting.
So the American cheese debate is one we're having because people have said, Zach has said that's what he puts on his.
But let me jump in there. Reed, you've fixed those burgers, and it was not, when I partook, which has only been about twice.
I had them on vacation.
It was Colby Jack.
Colby Jack cheese, yeah. Which, look, all cheese is processed to a degree.
Well, that's true.
And it's all oil because
you can't get too fancy with the cheese because, well, nobody likes a pretentious burger, for one thing. It's a hamburger.
I agree to agree.
Now, I went to a place
that
the
could
other
be
day.
a bumper sticker, right? Nobody likes a pretentious burger.
Yeah. Zach, well, next time you want to debate, I'm going to send my son. Check out his vocabulary.
I like your son. I agree with him. You're the one. Like, what's funny is your dad, Reed, he gives me a hard time for the words I use and calls me pretentious. But when it comes to food, and you're right. Nobody likes a pretentious burger. And so we go proceed. I don't want to hear what you have to say.
Well, what's funny is I don't even know what that means. But
no, these people putting goat cheese on a burger, and peach preserves,
blue cheese.
Nobody likes that crap,
right?
But you just keep it simple: Colby Jack or American cheese if they got it.
Well, I like Reed because he's saying either or. You could do either.
Reed,
keep it simple. I like Colby Jack the best because we just eat Colby.
We grew up with Dad doing the red rind, just Wisconsin cheese. That's what he always cut up for us, which was excellent. It's an excellent cheese.
One of the reasons if I ever moved to Wisconsin, I love cheese.
Well, we just had a guy was down here. The guy that was doing the thing on the gun, and he brought cheese, which I'm impressed. Anytime someone comes to visit us from Wisconsin, just bring cheese because that's one of the reasons we love it.
How I missed that handoff.
Yeah, I think old Stone kind of knifed in on you there, Jase, because I saw two wheels. I just went in and took it because technically it's still kind of my house. But
well, I've seen a pattern develop here. We go duck hunting, and then it's like the ducks know, it's time for them to leave and go do the podcast because the last time we had to do a podcast during duck season.
You think the ducks are listening? Some of them are maybe listening to the podcast.
Reed, what happened today?
Random.
What?
Well, we got out there. We jumped up a bunch of ducks. And we thought, okay, here we go.
They were there before dark, so illegal to shoot.
Yeah,
they were there when we got there.
Yeah.
But you hate jumping them out when you come in, right?
It was a wad of them. We said, let's see how many come back. We sat there for 3 hours. How many came back?
One.
Jay
missed him, which I gave him a hard time about. He clipped him, and then
he's down. But the day's not over yet, so we have one, maybe. But so we get out, moving the decoys because after this podcast is over,
you're back.
Well, because of what happened. Tell them what happened.
We're standing in the decoys, picking up the decoys, and here comes 7 teal, fly right over our head. If I had a gun, we could have shot them.
Yeah, they were just floating I mean, right when we've been sitting here 3 hours,
Looking for death.
seen one duck.
Yeah.
Here comes 7 teal. So then we started the mud motor, and look up. Here's 4 more coming. Teal, which teal are usually the leading edge because there's a front coming through today.
So y'all may can get them today.
Well, I'm just saying we need to factor this in when doing podcasts during duck season.
that sounds like this message is directed at you. You're a podcast maven.
Or we gotta move the times around so we're not patterned by the duck.
Just in case they're listening and know when we record.
Kind of weird that the moment we got out there, I mean, the moment.
Yeah.
Well, you know what Si always said? Si said that they know because every time you go to leave, something's going to come in, which is not true. It's not every time, but it is a lot of time.
I think they know. I used to hunt that Bald Knob wildlife sanctuary. Well, it was a sanctuary that had white posts.
Well, that would be against the law to hunt.
I didn't hunt the sanctuary. I hunted the refuge, but you could hunt the refuge until noon. And you would see this up in Arkansas. The ducks would come up. I mean, thousands of them, and they would fly. And I'd be right on the edge of that white fence post, and they'd fly to that fence post
and turn back
around. And they do that and then as soon as 12:02, when you're putting up your decoys, they are lighting in the decoys. So I think there's something. I do think.
Well, there is.
Like
They do figure some stuff out.
I hate to poo-poo on your parade, but my dad had me and a few other hands because here we have blue line sanctuaries. And even though we're pretty far from the refuge and the sanctuary, he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to paint our lines of our property with blue paint. Because if the ducks come down in this area, they will think this is a sanctuary. Y'all are laughing, but we painted the trees. We have a blue line on the entryway of the flyway to our property, and that was the thought.
You talk about paranoia gone to the heart. I mean,
that's got Phil Robertson written all over it. That's hilarious, actually.
I never heard that one. I missed that.
Did it work?
True story.
Jase, did it work?
Well,
did it work?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's kind of subjective. I mean, we did have our better years.
If only we could talk
that.
to the ducks, we could ask them.
So, anyway,
I could see a new law be getting passed. You can't paint your fence posts. You can't. There'll be certain.
well, that's what I was
colors
going to tell you. You should have thrown some white paint right around where you were at.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
It's not a bad idea.
Well, the greatest is interesting you brought this up, and I think we've told the story before on the podcast, but the greatest fight we ever had that had legs, it went a few days, there were apologies made, was over us leaving early. And it wasn't really early. We left.
You were actually there for
I was there for that.
That was the only time.
And I was blamed, of course, because we were at that time doing business. And so, I just tell Dad, it's like 12:30. We hadn't seen anything in a while.
No, it wasn't 12. I know the story in detail, Al. I have relived.
Well, I know, but your memory of details, as your daughter confirmed on this podcast, are not always accurate.
I said
you got that ability to then twist things that fit your narrative.
No,
so
we were shooting a few mallards. And I said, we need to give them till noon.
Yeah.
And you said, that'll work because Phil has this
had an interview,
meeting at
couple interviews,
whatever, at 12 so-and-so.
Yeah, 12:30, 12:45.
But what happened was at about 11:45, because I was seeing the signs that I thought something magical could happen. And I said, let's give them till 12. And then Phil said, well, by the time I get the boat, because I got this thing I got to go to, which I didn't mind because...
And he was not happy with me about it, but I was like, Dad, you agreed to do it. I'm just your man in the middle.
But
I was taking the blame, but I was just the guy that set it up because Dad said, yes, I'll do it.
I didn't mind Phil allowing that time, 15 minutes, to go get the boat because I thought, well, if some ducks come, he knows how to make himself hidden,
right.
And we're in timber.
Yeah.
But when he left, it's like the authority left. And so it was a breakdown because then Godwin's like, well, I need to I need to.
He had something. He had a little project.
I think his project was what he called a nature calling. And so he started grabbing his waders, and so he goes down. We had a staircase on this blind, still do.
Elmo.
And so then Martin, he left for some reason. So everybody started leaving.
So I went down the decoy.
So I said, "Well, I'll start picking up the decoys." Now that's where I objected. I said, "No, let's wait till the motor cranks up." I fired that out there. Nobody listened. So then I look up. These ducks had done this pattern all day. We would see them, and we had a few mallards.
Up until about 9. We hadn't seen anything in a couple
We hadn't seen anything in a couple hours, but they'd go down and work what we call the lake, which you could see them. But they would work around, not go in, and then they would come up there on us, and we would get them in. So I looked up, and here's 100. Over 100 mallards.
One big bunch.
In one bunch. This is the stuff duck hunters
Okay,
dream
so
about.
let me interject for just a second. I remember this story when I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
I vividly remember it was 75.
Well, Si made it 75.
But it is now 100.
Well,
to the point.
It's
Although
100.
he's right about the timing. It has grown to 100. Okay.
So I called to alert everyone there's ducks in the area, and I hollered out, "You got 3 minutes. Find a tree," because I knew they were coming. They're going to go down there and work around, and they're going to come, which I thought, no problem. And we had a cameraman documenting this whole story.
Oh, yeah.
So we can run the footage back, and I'm going to say it's closer to 100. I mean, I'm not going to make up a story if there's visual evidence.
For years, it was 75, but you're right.
So those ducks, 3 minutes. I'm thinking now everybody is safe. There's only
I'm still in the blind with you.
there's only a couple men in the blind. I think Jay was in there, and the cameraman's filming this. So those 100 ducks start coming toward us. They flank out to the left. I called, and they locked, and no circle.
Straight in.
Came straight down.
Yep.
And when they got about 40 yards coming straight down, so not broken down backpedaling, but just coming, I saw the lead group start going up. So what I did was I just looked up out in the decoys because I thought, why are they going up? And there's one man standing in the middle of the decoy spread with about 12 decoys behind him, and with his big, thick glasses on, looking right at him. So I raised up. Now I'm mad.
Because they're leaving now.
And just shot one time.
Yep.
And folded a mallard drake.
Yep.
He just folded, didn't keep shooting, put my gun down and said, "What are you doing in the middle of the decoy?"
And man, that torched into the biggest argument you've ever heard. Dad came back. He's mad. He's mad at me for having to do this thing. He's mad at Si. Si's, you've been I got tracks on my back where I've been driven.
I will confess, I said things that I should not have said, that Jesus would
Apologies
not have said.
were made by people.
And the worst thing I said is what really escalated it. I said, "I wish I had a piece of cane right now." And so I said, "Why is that?" I said, "Because I'd whoop every one of you."
Oh, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was the worst situation we'd ever had duck hunting. And it happened all the way back. We get back, Dad calls a meeting in the yard. Everybody's getting ready to leave.
Yeah, and I thought he was going to chew everybody out, but he mainly targeted Si and Al.
Yeah,
Al for lining up the
me for being the interview
in duck season, and Si for not finding the tree.
Yeah.
Si said, "Well, he said, I am behind the tree." Well, everybody was looking at him. He wasn't anywhere near.
There were no trees though. He said, "I don't care if you got to take a leak. You just squeeze it off."
Yeah, it was.
It was harsh. It was bad. And later on, he said he overreacted. So it was over a bunch of ducks that came in, and I was like, "Whoa!" So
conflict happened.
So then there's that.
But you think we've hunted 40 years and we've only had one.
That's the worst one we ever. There's always been some jawboning, but that was one where tempers were high.
Well, that one lives in infamy.
That lives in.
I was mad. I'm not going. The old man reared his head. I was ready to fight.
You still seem a little bitter about it. It felt like you got.
Well, you got to remember back then this is before Duck Dynasty and all that
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of stuff. And so we were making a living by making duck hunting videos. And I just thought to myself, we just had a chance to get 100 mallards in one of the tightest timber holes in the world. And they were coming. There's everybody agreed with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there was one problem. There was a human being in the middle of the duck hole.
Yep.
And he flared them.
Yep.
And it wasn't like we didn't even shoot any. I shot one just to
Now,
say
if he
they
were
close
here,
enough.
in his defense, if he were here, he has a totally different defense of his actions. So I would have a totally different defense. He claims a lot of claims that, and I was there. It was, everybody has their version of what happened, but
Well, that's why he got chewed out. So we've come a long way, but family. We're in this section in Colossians 3 talking about how families should operate.
yeah, because he only gave like 4 verses about wives and husbands, children, and parenting. But really, I mean, you think about it, we talked about it before. Of course, Reed's here now, which is good. I want to get his take on some of this. But the idea is that the application of raising kids and then your kids raise kids and kind of what you guys are experiencing. I mean, you may only get a little bit of guidance and direction, but I mean, there's a lot of application that goes on in people's everyday lives.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure I quoted Colossians 3:20 to Reed at some point in his early age, which is one of my favorite verses when you have parents and children living in your home.
Yeah.
Which is, children, obey your parents in everything.
Right.
Which is where you get the saying, well, why do I have to do that? I think your mom did this more than me. She's like, because I said so.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Colossians
Hey, my kids
3:20.
are only 3, and I say it all the time.
So it lives on. I will say this, Reed, and I don't know if I've said this before because Reed hasn't been in the podcast. So Reed is also named Silas. So you got Silas Merritt, the original. You got Jason Silas. You got Reed Silas. Are there any more Silases other than y'all three?
Well, my son is now named David Silas.
Oh boy! So now we got 4. So
Now, we have a picture that we took last Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Last Thanksgiving with the 4 Silas.
and I will say we don't know yet about David Silas, but out of you 3, there is something in there. So it must be the name. It must be something. And Reed did it as a kid. He would come in. We'd be at the beach, and he would come in, and he would have the most fantastical tales you've ever heard about what he saw. This shark, it came out. It went for one of the kids. I mean, like, he would tell these stories, and we would all just be laughing because we were like, I don't know, Reed.
Got that
But
side.
it was that side. It was that ability to tell a story that you're just enraptured by it, but part of your mind is saying, there's no way this could be true. And so that seems to run that thread of the name. I don't know what it is about it, but Reed had that.
Well, see, during these holidays, so David Silas is how old?
About to be 2.
So he's not 2 yet.
Yeah.
And I haven't, up until this, literally since yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
he's been just like Maris, which is his oldest, and she's 3.
Mm-hmm.
When they see me, they're like, oh no. There's a bit of terror because Missy goes and visits more than I do, but I go.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, but if I start going toward them, it's, it just immediately.
Mhm.
So I think Reed's wife, Brighton, was she's feeling bad for me. And so y'all had something y'all did, and y'all left us down here, Maris. And so, and I think I told that story on a podcast. When Missy had gone somewhere, she was still keeping her distance, but she had fallen, and I was like, I'm all you got. And she sat there and thought
She's
about
weighing it out in her
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. And I forgot Missy had left or something for some reason, and she just thought, you know what? if this is where it's got to happen, and she crawled up in my lap, and it was like, well, we're good. Ever since then, we've been good.
You had the
She
moment.
gives me, bye-bye hugs and kisses, and J-Rock, and she's a little chatterbug. She talks.
Oh, she never stops talking.
Yeah. And so David is the exact opposite. he's like a grown man as far as the way he articulates in a little 2-year-old body. I mean, he kind of, and then he'll say something, J-Rock. It's real low. So Reed had showed him a cooking, one of the cooking videos, and he was sitting there watching it, and he was like going. And Reed sent me one of these. What do you call them where they keep repeating the same thing, like a meme thing?
Yeah.
And but it wasn't a meme. He just kept saying J-Rock, J-Rock. While he's watching TV.
Yeah.
I thought, well, I may have a chance. So when they arrive a few days ago, it was like, no, he started coming toward me. Nope. And so I started going toward him. I was like, well, I thought we might have had something from him watching the film. So, no. So they had this project. They're like, same kind of deal. We went to we got something local called the Candy, what was it called?
Candy Cane
Lane?
Yeah, Candy Cane Lane.
And so look,
Christmas lights.
for a nominal fee, you can drive your vehicle.
This one in Calhoun?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'd never been there.
Oh, it's amazing.
And you can drive through. Well, Missy's got this little bug of a car that I got her on the little duck show. And so see, some of that actually happened.
You put the
She
top
still
down.
Put the top down, because there's no rules. I mean, the first sign you see is enter at your own risk. I mean, there's people hanging out of cars, kids, you're driving one.
And you wonder what that even means. I mean, is it a deer hunting
No,
woods?
no.
What's
Well,
going
because you
It
turn
could
your
be.
lights off,
Yeah.
there's kids
Yeah.
standing up, hollering, and I mean, it's just kind of every car for themselves. So we put the top down. Well, now, David Silas is right beside me. Well, as we're going through, he was just mesmerized by all the lights. But every once in a while, every 15, 20 seconds, he would lean over my ear and go, J-Rock. Just kept doing it. We'd go about like, oh, look at the tractor, because he likes tractors. He leaned over, hey, J-Rock. And we were getting so tickled. Now, even though we weren't really touching, he was close, and he just kept going, J-Rock.
That's his connector.
J-Rock.
Just he knows who you
So
are.
we go through that, and I thought, well, we tried. It's okay. So we get back home that night, and I think Missy had ordered pizza, and everybody's, we're eating pizza. Everybody's fine. And then all of a sudden, whoomp, he tripped and fell. David Silas did, and just, and he had a stranger, like, cry. He just laid flat down and was just like, rah, rah. So, of course, Missy runs over there, and she's like, trying to get him up, and she's like, you want Lulu? And he was like, no. And we were going through all the people.
Yeah.
Mom,
Yeah.
Dad. He stands up and says, J-Rock. And it was Chariots of Fire and music. He starts coming toward me, and I thought, is this really happening? Missy's mouth was this wide open, just like, and we just boom, and I put him on the hip, quit crying.
In that moment, the bond was established. Grandson to grandson.
Reed, did that just happen?
And that night before he went to bed, he came over and gave you a hug too.
He gave me a hug.
It's happened to
It
us.
was-
The bond
I
has
just
been made.
I couldn't believe
And it is funny. You'd think that was like that wouldn't happen, but it does. Like out of all my grandkids, Doc was that way. At first, he was hesitant. He held back. And I would joke with all the other grandkids, and they would laugh, but he would always be like, And now, whenever we're home, he's the first one there, and he's always sitting right next to us. So it is interesting how they make those changes. So, yeah, that's part of that is, I don't know why that is, why some kids just react differently. They're almost afraid of you at first. They're not sure. I don't know.
Well, I thought it had to do something with the way I look.
Well,
but,
that goes unsaid. We don't have to say
I've
that.
said,
To
I
realize.
only have 3 basically views. I'm either homeless, a threat to society, or one of the duck people.
Well,
that show.
at this point, Jase, we were all much more afraid when you shaved your beard off.
Yeah, I was too. I was afraid of myself.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, a lot
It
changes.
looks kind of scary.
Yeah, a lot changes underneath there over the course of our age, from that 45 to 60 stage.
Exactly. So before we get in the text, I just thought it'd be interesting because I think part of the problem, I mean, somebody, a preacher once said, which at first I thought, I don't know about that. But he said the hardest people to reach for Jesus are people who are raised in a church setting.
Yeah.
And his point was, you kind of ride on your parents' faith, and but we all know everybody has to come to the conclusion on their own that Jesus is the Son of God.
Well, I had a question for you, Reed, before we get into some of the textual stuff, but just a practical question, because a lot of people ask me about you guys, about you and Cole, Sadie, and John Luke. And obviously, Sadie's out there a lot, so people kind of her public persona. But they ask about what our fears were doing a show on national television, and we had teenagers at the time, all of y'all, and preteens. And were we afraid of that? And I was like, well, yes. I mean, I think every family member, especially who had kids y'all's age, were fearful about just all of a sudden thrusting ourselves potentially into the national limelight. Then it happened because the show was a huge hit. And even though the show was good and, our fan base was amazing, it still puts a lot of pressure on people. So I wanted to hear from your perspective, because I've asked Sadie about it before on here, what that was like to go through that. Was that, because you're a part of it, as a teenager, how did you deal with that? Was it difficult?
Well, I probably have a different answer than you would expect. I mean, as an adult now, I'm an adult, I'm a parent, I'm a business owner. I think differently than I did, obviously, as a teenager.
Right.
But, I never even, thinking about the kids, I never even really watched it. I watched it, but all the episodes and I didn't really, I was chasing girls and playing football and doing whatever. So looking back at it now, I never really even critically thought. I just woke up one day and said, "Man, this is cool."
Yeah.
That really is the crux of it. Obviously I knew what was happening but it surprised everybody. For one thing, nobody realized how huge it was going to be. I remember the very first time we thought, oh, this is something. We were on the way to the beach and we stopped at that restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And we walked in there and ate. And from that moment on, that was it. No more eating in restaurants.
Yeah.
It was
where you weren't recognized.
We were there for like 4 hours, and it's like it was just a bizarre phenomenon to us. We were like, "This is insane."
Right.
Yeah, people just lined up at our table.
Right.
And,
We've all had a few of those.
You remember later we tried it one other time, and there was some kind because somebody said, "You got to eat here. It's fantastic. It's on the beach," and we went, and somehow we were waiting, and we got separated. And I never could get back to y'all.
Yeah.
I
I remember
it
that.
just a mob formed. I'm not complaining, but I was like, I need to go. I'm with my family, but I couldn't get away.
Because it's unmanaged. It's hard to be able to do that.
Oh, Reed, I remember thinking, I'm just going to have to run off here. And Reed come up there and gave the crowd a speech. And since he was my son, he got away with it. He was basically like, this is my dad. We're on vacation and we have a table. So he's got to go. Sorry. And that party died. Remember that, Reed?
Yeah. It just got to the point where it's like, we're going to be here all night. But all that stuff is great, awesome. There's no telling the lives that have been impacted, the number of lives. I don't think you can quantify it, by the show and this podcast. And, so it's been an amazing thing. And like I said, looking back at it, I wasn't even critically thinking about it whatsoever. I was like, yeah. And too, I was in high school. I had all my friends. I was playing football. I was doing whatever. I was trying to figure out my life too. So it was just kind of and we're in a small town, and after after the first, few months in my groups, at least, it kind of just like, hey, that's pretty cool, and that was it. Just move on about your life.
Because everybody else is just you were a part of their lives before that ever happened, which is interesting. You gave me a new perspective I hadn't thought about, that when you don't bear the responsibility of something and yet you're a part of it, it does change your view of it. In other words, for especially your dad and Will and Corey, they had a responsibility as we're doing the show to make it good, and you had this weight of that
and forward thinking in terms
exactly
of business and what's the next 3 years going to look like, and how am I, all that stuff plays a factor into it. But I think from my perspective, it bleeds into what you were saying with riding on the coattails of your parents' faith. I mean, that was me for years. I mean, since I was baptized when I was 12, and from that point, I thought, well, I got it, and I just rode on your coattails for as long as I could remember, and it was like, well, I'm going and I'm doing and I'm speaking and I'm singing and I'm doing all this stuff. And it was like, well, I've got that all figured out. That's a box I checked and I'm good, but it's kind of the same thing with the show. Well, I was just along for the ride with that too. So it kind of amplified that in a way, because it forced me into a world that no one's prepared for, right. Especially when it happens like it did. But I wasn't prepared for, and I didn't actively prepare for it. And I was just like, what am I doing next? They're like, hey, yeah, you're going to go over here and, what are they going to pay me? They're going to pay you $100. It's like, well, oh, cool. So it's just, and I just show
That's why
up.
I'm saying you didn't really have a choice. None of the kids have a choice. You had to be part of what was going on anyway.
Right.
And I was going to mention, and I want you guys to go look. A lot of you probably have never seen this. The very first thing we did on I Am Second was we called it like a Prodigal Series. And originally they had approached us about it was going to be Dad and me and Reed, and just kind of telling our stories from our perspective of what it was like to struggle with faith as a young person, and then come to a point where you figure out some things on your own. Dad was older than you and I were, Reed, but we were both teenagers and then figured some things out later. But I felt like Jep needed to be a part of it, because I had been telling my story a long time, and Jep had never really told his. And so it wound up being Dad and Jep and Reed. And then Mom came in as well. But to me, like all of our stuff we've done with I Am Second has been great. I mean, I love all the stuff we've done, but that was still my favorite because it was the first and I was involved in helping put it together. But if you've never seen that, go watch it, because Reed has some really cool stuff that he shares on there. And I was going to ask you, I don't know if I've ever asked you about it, because I've been a part of it now too, because we did a later series. There's something about sitting in that chair and the way the lighting is and everything that really just kind of...
It brings it out of you.
It brings it out. Yeah. It's like a bare your soul moment. I was going to ask you about it. It's been many years ago since you did it, but it was pretty powerful.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that there's settings like that. If you're around godly people, and I think the Spirit moves and the presence of God, blesses those things. Yeah. Because it just, you sit down in a place like that, and it's, and there is kind of a mission and an objective of like, hey, we would like you to share your story. Well, it's like, okay, well, here it is, but it just has this feeling of you can just lay it all out there, and it just happens. And I mean, I love those guys over there.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And because they're based in Franklin, which is where you're from, we've had now different dealings with them since then, with Angie and all the crew. So IamSecond.com is where that is. If you've never heard of it, go look it up. All of our stuff, we've done several since, but it's all really, really good. But that first one is still kind of my favorite.
I get more people come up to me and talk about, it used to be Duck Dynasty and I Am Second. It was like neck and neck. I mean, they'd say, they'd come up and be like, hey, I saw you. And I, you just think on Duck Dynasty. And they say, I Am Second. I loved it. Thank you so much for sharing. And now it's the podcast, and they still, people come up to me all the time and say, I watched your I Am Second. I mean, it's a really cool thing.
And the whole ministry is about telling stories, and a lot of them are people that are athletes and people that you've heard of or know. But it's the idea is that we all got a story, and the story is we all need Jesus. I mean, that's what it gets back to.
That's how we ended the blind. I mean, I love that.
Yeah,
think of Phil. I was really one of his last just things we got on video where he he was in his full Phil mode and had the greatest ending. What did he say? I could be wrong,
but I doubt it.
it.
But I tell you what, Zach, just from sitting in the theater that first time I watched it, and I didn't know because I had not seen obviously how you guys were going to work that in, and when it's fade to black at the end, you're getting ready for the credits, and all of a sudden you hear Dad's voice before you see him, and you know it's like this is current Phil. I mean, I got chills on top of chills after watching the whole film. To then hear his voice and then to watch and hear what he said, I mean, it was powerful.
Well, you know whose idea it was, don't you?
Jase, I think, wasn't it?
It was Jase's idea. He had called me and said Phil's not going to like because he watched I think Jase may have been one of the first people to watch.
Well, I think can we just be fully transparent now that it's been in theaters a couple of years or whatever it's been? You said, well, I really want you to help me promote this. And I said, well, I'm going to have to see it first. that was how
Jase
it went
always
down.
goes back to trust but verify.
Well, I just thought, okay, because it's like, oh, it's a movie about your dad and your family. Will you help us promote it? I'm like, well, after I see it. Because I thought there's a lot of people that have good ideas. But
so you might not would have trashed it, but if you didn't like it, you wasn't going to talk about it.
I wasn't going to promote it. I mean, I hate to tell you that, but that was what was coming next. But I watched it and I thought, sure, it was y'all did a good job with it.
Yeah.
But when I watched it, I thought to myself, my dad is not going to like this, even though it's well done. And because I thought, he's going to want to try to use this to get Jesus out there. And even though it kind of has a few points about, it's kind of a backdrop of his life, it doesn't get into detail about why. Like, what was the actual message that he heard in detail? And so that's why I told Zach, I said, I think at the end, you should have him just let him talk. Say, what was it exactly that you heard that made you say, yeah, to that scene where he baptized him? And so Phil basically shared that.
And it's perfect
because you said Phil is going to want, you have to say these words: the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. And if you've been around Phil any amount of time, I mean, how if there's one phrase that we've heard him repeat over and over, it's that 1 Corinthians 15 verse 1-4 passage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that he's lived his life on that passage, and so that's really what he said at the end. I mean, that was the message.
Well, so there's a couple of things about that. One is I think Dad has never realized, just because of his nature, about how powerful just a life change story is. In other words, it was way more powerful than he would have thought just by watching it on the screen. Because I've talked to way too many people before they ever got to that point that were like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, I knew I had to change the way I was living.
Yeah.
Well, there's a power in that. And,
Well, there is, but I just know.
but he doesn't realize that, and I think it's out of humility, but he doesn't realize that. So he thinks, no, we gotta explain what that means.
I knew he would want that.
You're exactly right.
Well, when he watched it, he came to me, and I didn't, pull an Uncle Si and said, yeah, I told him to do that.
Yeah.
He just said, now when they put that last part in there, that was the key. And then I just thought to myself, yep, that's what I thought.
And it was very much a late edition, and it just so happened that I Am Second was doing a thing with Rucker over in Dallas, and so Zach made it all happen where we could get it in that format. Because Zach Reedwood and I both realized in that chair, you say things that are just really...
Well, he called me that morning, and we had that conversation, did the podcast. Angie's in the room.
Yeah, and I said, this is too much to be a coincidence. And that's kind of why you had the thought. But I said, because Zach was like, well, the movie's done. And I was like, no, the movie's never done. I've been in show business enough to know when they say, that's it, it's a wrap. No, it's not a wrap.
Oh, Jay Scorsese came in at the end and said, nope. I do want to tell you this, Reed, because I don't think I've ever told you this. So I got like a really insider tour of the Bible Museum in D.C., And I didn't realize they had it there, but that original white chair is in there.
Oh wow!
And so I was like, oh, the I Am Second chair. And so I went up and I looked at the back of it. There it was, Reed Robertson, Phil and Kay, because everybody signs the back of it.
It's in the museum.
It's in the Bible Museum.
Wow.
The original white chair, which was now they've had several.
Well, I've been to the Bible Museum. That must have been a late edition.
Maybe
I
so.
remember seeing that.
It's there, and your name is on there. I found it.
I was going to ask,
Take a
Reed,
picture for it.
so when you started off talking about, kind of riding on the coattails of your parents' faith, which is a normal thing, which is why I think the guy made the statement, it's hard to find your own faith in there. It was a lot easier for me because I saw my dad just transformed.
Mm-hmm.
Then later found out why. Then as I was researching why, I was like, this is a pretty good story here. I mean, I was in my own Bible reading. So I was going to just kind of button that up. So when do you think, because you've grown tremendously. I mean, I think Missy and I and Reed and his wife, Brighton, we had, a 3-hour Bible study last night?
May have been more than that.
that maybe 4. That just happened kind of organically, after the kids went to bed, which is why we didn't get any sleep last night. But I thought, to sit around now with, you're almost 30 years old, and just have a deep, meaningful, what we've been studying. And I thought it was fantastic. So I'm saying, what were the key points you think of the transition, or when did you wait? Was it when you became a husband, or was it just, because it's all a growth process where at some point, because now I look at you, you're leading your family I think better than I did when my kids were little. Sorry. But, they did their little Devo, and we've done that many nights that they've been with us, and it's really impressive. Of course, it helps that Reed can sing so well.
Yeah.
Because it's more of a singing, then we have a little sermon.
And I wonder about that too.
We call it family worship.
Yeah, family
and
worship.
And we're passionate about it because
that's why I'm bringing it up. Yeah, it is. You can tell.
And we do it every night. The kids, we do dinner, then they do the bath, and then we do something. We don't let them watch, a lot of TV or whatever, but they like to watch. When I said that I didn't really watch the show, it's fun now because now I'm going back and we're watching it all because they love watching you and Mom and they'll see me on there too, but they don't even recognize me.
Yeah, you're just a kid.
Yeah. And we've watched When I Fell Off That Boat. We have watched that 1,000 times. She's like coming out of her chair, like getting ready. It's funny,
I've said that so many times. Can you imagine just one of these little blessings you get, being able to your kids now, and think about it when they get older, then they're going to have children, to be able to have a television show where you can go back and watch. And most people, there's one picture of Dad's great grandfather in existence. So you just look at that picture, and you wonder what that man's life was like. They're going to have recorded things of when you were a kid to be able to look. What a blessing that is.
Yeah.
Well, and y'all sang some in there.
Yeah.
Reed wouldn't say this because he's humble, but Reed's a world-class singer.
Very good.
And a good. He's actually done a few events, which is nice when you can speak about Jesus and sing about Jesus with equal enthusiasm.
When you went to Nashville originally to try to pursue a music career, but I've always thought, and this is just your uncle looking in, but I've always thought that move that you and Brighton made, and she went to school and y'all wound up building a life there, has been a real benefit for you guys. It seems to have that independence has helped.
We have always felt that way just because, both of our families live here. We're very close.
Yep.
It just with close families like that, you're always going to lean on your family, and that's great. But it forced Brighton and I. We got married young. I was 21. I was 21. She had just turned 21, and we moved off, and it was just me and her. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any life career goal. We were just like, we're moving to Nashville because Reed wants to be a singer. Well, we quickly figured out that wasn't going to make any money when I got up there. So I'm looking around
you found out there's a lot of talented people singing, right?
I'm looking around like, man, when you got to pay your own bills, this stuff starts to add up pretty quick. And And so, but it was just us, and we had to figure everything out on our own. And we struggled through, and that's really part of what is my testimony, is that during that time when we got on our own, well, now all of a sudden I didn't have Whites Ferry Road and giving me the come to Jesus meetings at night, all that stuff. I didn't have any of that. It was up to me, and I was the leader of my household, but I wasn't being that. I wasn't being the spiritual leader that I need to be. Brighton lost her dad. We were going through hard times, and I wasn't there for her like I should have been on a spiritual level for sure. And so we actually stopped going to church, saying, well, we can't find one that we like, and then it just turned into, well, it's been a year and we hadn't been, it's like, well, we started saying, well, we can't find one we like. Well, it's like, well, we hadn't even been to one in a year. So it's kind of hard to find one, if you ain't looking.
Exactly.
So when we had Maris was the first time in a long time that I realized, I thought, okay, this is all of a sudden way bigger than just me. And I started to realize, like, okay, I'm doing whatever I want to do that makes me comfortable, and I had started my business, and I was just full-fledged in that, just worrying about myself, and Brighton was working as a nurse, we were living kind of parallel lives, and we had Maris, and she decided, I'm going to stay home and raise the kids. Well, we both decided that. And I just took a hard look and thought, I've relied completely on myself for the last few years here, and it convicted me. I mean, I think the Lord convicted me and said, you think you're going to be a leader of this household, and you think you're going to, this is a gift of a child that I've given you, and that's really the core concept that we strive to produce in our lives every day. Is our children are a gift from God, and it's our job here on earth to steward their souls for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so one of our main principles is to have them realize, almost force them to realize as they get older, their need for a savior. It's not, I'm not just going to sit down and when they get in trouble and sit down and, which is something we did a lot of, we got in trouble and, okay, it's time for a come to Jesus meeting, and it would be a 5-hour sermon.
Yeah.
It'd be 11:30 at night. I'm falling asleep on the couch. Like, I'm actually praying, Lord, let this end,
I know Unashamed listeners would find that shocking that would come from Jase, but I'm glad Reed has confirmed it.
Hey, looking back, I'm thankful for him.
Yeah, me too.
But I mean, my main objective is to have my children grow up and realize their need for a savior, And so one of the things, getting back to what we do every night, is we call it family worship. And we go through, now they're too young to really go through any real scripture, and that kind of stuff. But we try to make it fun, we've got like these little things where I say half the sentence and she finishes it, and then I'll say the first word, and she's gotten to the point where she can say the whole thing, and we memorize, a psalm or something like that, and it takes her, it'll take her a solid month, and it's like 29 days of this child is never going to get this. And then I'll say, okay, psalm, and she's like 9:1, and just goes through the whole thing. It's amazing how they can pick it up.
What's really amazing is when David, I said after I picked him up, because he wanted me, and I was like, who do you love? And he went, God.
Yeah.
I said, answer. Well, that's a better answer.
Yeah.
He's learned the
what's funny about that, Reed? My mom, she would sit, when we were small kids, she would sit in the closet of our bedroom at night, and she would, every night, and she would turn on the light. She would pick up her Bible, and she would teach us the Bible. And it's funny that when I look back at my life and think, what was the most formative reason of why I love Jesus today? It was because of those early years of spiritual formation that at the time seemed probably in my mind. I don't even know if I didn't think, I wasn't having these existential moments of like, wow, God is so amazing. But it was that. And two, I think that the worship with your kids in your own home as a repetitive liturgy that you do over and over and over again. And that speaks volumes to their character and their realization of a need for a Savior. So I love that you're doing that. I think that is, that is how
it
you
makes
parent.
me so proud that my daughter's 3 years old, and I can ask her, what song do you want to sing tonight? And she'll say the song, and I'll start it, and she will sing the whole thing. I mean, holy, holy, holy. She will sing the entire song.
Good.
And David's 2 years old. I mean, the kid knows, 15 words.
Yeah.
And we sing, Jesus loves me, and he'll go Jesus, and then he love me this I know, everybody's singing it, and then we go for that, and he goes Bible. He's got it, and it's just, it makes you so proud.
Yeah.
And so that is one aspect of it, is like, I'm like, man, I mean, it softens your heart like nothing I have ever experienced.
Well, and it's nice to have a heart that is able to be softened. So we're out of time. We will, on the next podcast, we will dive into liturgy and what that means, because I saw Jase's eyes shoot up as soon as Zach said it. So it's another one of those words we'll have to deal with. So Reed, thanks for being on.
Yep. Thanks.
See you next time on Unashamed.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes.